Hi there, and welcome to Inside View. I am your host, Joel Metzger, and joining me on the show today is Alan Vallow, who is the General Manager of UWPA, otherwise known as Utica Water and Power Authority.
It's great to be here.
It's really good to have you on the show. Alan, you have never had a General Manager from UWPA on the show. You're the first one, and you're relatively new to this particular job. So welcome to the county, and I'm glad to have you on board. How did you end up getting hired as the GM for UWPA?
Well, it was just kind of by happenstance. I've been in the water and power industry for most of my 32 years of my career, and last year I decided to take a adult sabbatical and just catch my breath a little bit. And in the middle of catching my breath, this opportunity was kind of passed my way, and I thought, this is great. It's everything. It's small. It's in countryside like I grew up in, and absolutely outstanding people in the organization. And just was the right fit at the right time. So it was just one of those, just perfect timing. So
just give me a very brief explanation of kind of what UWPA does. We're going to go into that in much more detail. But what is UWPA?
Well, Utica Water and Power Authority, which for apparently years and years was just UPA, Utica Power Authority, which actually miscasts what UWPA really is. What UWPA truly is a water purveyor. We're a water company. We deliver water to our member. We're a joint powers agency, so our two members are the City of Angels and UPUD, Union Public Utility District. And we happen to generate power, which is intended to, in very good years or in good years, totally offset the cost of delivering that water. And so we're first and foremost a bulk water, wholesale water company to our owners, to our members. And it just so happens we generate the power to pay for it.
So that's a perfect short description, just so people know, well, what the heck is UWPA? So that's what you guys do, and we're going to kind of go through the whole system and how it works. But before that, for those who don't know you, I wanted to make sure we had a chance to introduce where you came from and what you've done over your career. So let's go all the way back. Where were you born and where did you grow up?
I was actually born in Neenah, Wisconsin.
No.
And I would call that the snow belt of sorts, but I consider Pennsylvania my home. I spent most of my formative years in south central Pennsylvania. I grew up about 20 miles west of Gettysburg, and right at the base of, we're in the hills of truly rural Appalachia, about 10 miles north of the Mason-Dixon line. Yeah, so being from Pennsylvania, I naturally went to Penn State. I wanted to be an engineer, so I became one. And upon graduation, I accepted a job with the City of Los Angeles Department of Water and Power. And so I worked with LA Water and Power. They don't have the best reputation in Northern California, but now that I've been in Northern California for nearly 20 years, I understand why.
I have to ask you, and I'm always curious about this, people who are raised very far away and they end up coming west, what made you decide to take that job and make such a big move?
At that time, we were coming out of, this was early 1980s, we were coming out of a recession. Well, not the Great Recession, but a recession. And California was where a lot of the jobs were. I happened to be in a very, at the time, a dying specialty of electrical engineering, that was power engineering. So my choices were pretty much electric utilities, and I wanted to be back in California. I wanted to go to California.
Okay.
And LA Water and Power also said, if you come out and work for us, we'll continue to send you to school. And that's why I did that.
So you came west, and how long did you spend with them, and then what was your next move?
Well, 15 years with Los Angeles, and I did everything from being a design engineer in transmission to writing contracts. I then spent the last 8 years there, actually as their legislative and regulatory policy person in D.C. and Sacramento, and so got a good taste of that, and I finally said, I've had enough of Southern California, I want to go north, and I was actually recruited to come and join the city of Lodi as they were entering deregulation, and I was their utility director for about 11 years. So,
okay.
And after that, I spent 4 years working with irrigation districts up north, and some of the folks that share the wonderful water out of the Calaveras, or out of the Stanislaus system, out of the watershed. And that's why I thought, I'm involved in the water. I want to get back into that. I'm not going back to L.A. I'm at the stage of my career where I want to make a difference, and hence I'm here. That's my whole career in a nutshell.
So you have just a huge amount of experience in exactly what you're doing day to day with the water and the power, which is, it's really great to have someone with your experience come up here. And so, what do you think people should know about water and power? Because, I think a lot of people, they turn their light switch on and the light comes on. Okay, that's great. I know I had to pay a bill at the end of the month. And water, they turn their tap on and, okay, well, as long as it's flowing, I'm fine with it. I'll pay my bill. But, beyond that, what do you think people really should know about these two very important resources?
Well, we all kind of went through the electric system meltdown. You may recall, 10 years ago, 10, 12 years ago. And it's funny, it's something that we don't recognize, we don't pay attention to, because the truth is, the minimum requirement for keeping your job in an electric utility is the light switch needs to respond when it's turned on or turned off. And quite frankly, water is perhaps taken for granted. And through the vagaries of Mother Nature, who would count on 4 years of back-to-back drought? So the bad news is we're in the 4th year of a drought, and that's impacted everyone, absolutely everyone statewide. It probably, and it's not fair to say it's impacted us less, it's impacted the water companies, the purveyors of the water, to a large extent. It's forced some very, what I'll call very poor public policy decisions out of Sacramento. And once you politicize something as important as a vital commodity, bad things are going to happen. And so that's, if people should know anything, it's pay close attention to what's coming out of the from the legislators and the regulators, particularly in Sacramento. And remember, you have a vote, and you can do that every time there is an election. But take notes and pay close attention, because the true character of what's vital to us up here, and it's not just for the watering lawns, the small home gardens, the economy up here. There's wonderful opportunities for even expansion of the agricultural base, the vineyards, the cattle. But it's this area needs to have the infrastructure, including the water, to grow and grow well into the future. And we do have it. And we do have that water. We don't necessarily have the infrastructure, but that's what we need to together work on. And that's one of the things I'm probably happiest about in the short time that I've been there, just how much I'll call cohesiveness and camaraderie there is among the various water agencies, and there are several. This is for a county this size. There's a lot of water agencies, so there's obviously a lot of history, and I think you'd have to agree that there's unprecedented levels of cooperation. Calaveras Conserves, which of course is your project that you brought to fruition. that's a testament to just outstanding community involvement and teamwork.
And that's something that does have a lot of history, as you mentioned, but you kind of came in almost with a clean slate because you didn't have any memories of past interactions that may have left a bad taste in your mouth. Do you think that that was a huge advantage to you in order to kind of turn over a new leaf with these agencies?
Yeah, absolutely, because it's, and it wasn't just me. I came at a time that, again, unprecedented. There's UWPA had me as a new general manager, and after the last election, we had a little change in our board. CCWD got a new general manager and new board members. The county got a new administrator and new board members. And so institutionally, none of us had memory of, as far as I know, of any past practices or watch out for this or watch out for that. It was a clean slate, and so I guess none of us knowing any better have just been getting along and doing things together. So,
and I guess that when you're this small, and because we really are very small here in Calaveras County compared to something like Met Water or some of these larger power companies, how important it is to try to work together in order to actually have a chance at getting projects done. Is that key in your mind, and do you think that's kind of the way forward?
Oh, absolutely, because the one thing, since we are all together, we're small separate for sure, but even together, we actually have resources that are key and vital and that do have value, particularly the other purveyors outside of the county. And it's significant enough that, it's an old Revolutionary War adage, we either hang together or we for sure will hang separately. And we are hanging together, and what we do have is that common voice, common message, because we do have some very well-respected, very articulate elected folks from this area, and they're taking the word back to Washington, D.C. and to Sacramento, and because we do have a common message, we're continuing to develop that, we will be able to develop jointly that infrastructure. Again, we have water. And the water has to go through us before it gets to anyone else. Who lays claim to it, that's a different story. But we do have, everyone, every owner of water rights will say, we have the oldest water rights in all of Northern California. Fact is, UWPA does. 1853, the first adjudicated 25 cubic feet per second. It's one of those things, bragging rights. Yeah, it's good because it's in the county. It's ours. It belongs to the county. And that's my view.
So it's a matter of how can we actually take advantage of these resources that are here that we really haven't fully utilized or even come close to utilizing a small portion of. And that's probably one of the biggest challenges, I imagine. But let's walk people through the system, because it's such a neat system, how this water comes down. So let's go all the way up to the very top. I mean, we obviously have snow in the mountains, but what's the first kind of man-made area that affects your system, and then what happens to the water from there?
Well, originally, there was a series of, a long series of flumes that went all the way back up in the hills, and those were operated all the way back in the mining days, back to 1853, as a matter of fact.
And what is a flume, for those who don't know?
Flume is a wooden, it's a wooden structure that looks like a perpetual railroad trestle, and it's built with very heavy timber, and in our case, it's lined then with aluminum to minimize leakage. And that starts at the top of the system, and for us now it's Hunter's Reservoir, and meanders down ultimately getting to the Murphy's powerhouse that was operated by PG&E. It was built in 1853. Now there's an older powerhouse, I believe was built in 1902. That's further up the road. You can tell, I mean, just historically, I mean, there probably, if it weren't for those flumes and it wasn't for the mining in the 1800s, there would have been no reason to have San Francisco. And so you could say that those flumes, that water, that mining, this area created the need for some of the cities we have on the coast.
Oh, San Francisco was nothing before the gold rush. It was just a tiny little town. So you mentioned Hunter's Reservoir is kind of the beginning of the system. Is that kind of up by Avery area?
Yes, it is.
Okay, and then it's quite a ways to get down from Avery to Murphy, so that's a lot of flume out on the side of that hill.
A lot of flume. There's a lot of canal that's lined. They're either gunnited or what they call shotcreted. And that it takes just 7 hours to, once you start water at one point, to see it at another point. So
it's not an instant thing by any means. You have to.
It's not turning on the tap.
Okay.
And that's one of the challenges of operating a system that's 27 miles long, 27 miles of ditches and flumes, and it takes time to get from one point to another, and then other folks taking water along the way.
And Alan, how does the water get to Hunter's? That's kind of an interesting story,
Well,
too.
it is. It's, originally, there were flumes that went up into the, what was at that time the upper Utica system. And with the design and the building of the Collierville project and the expansion of Spicer Meadows to New Spicer that holds a lot of water. So that water gets through down to the Collierville powerhouse from Spicer through a tunnel, very big tunnel. And about a quarter of the way down, we tap off that tunnel and take our water, it's kind of pressurized water, through a very large valve that we can control down from 1 CFS up to 1 cubic foot per second all the way to probably 75 cubic feet per second.
And that would pretty much have those flumes and ditches totally full if you were running it that high?
Absolutely. Yeah. And PG&E did. That system was designed for 88 cubic feet per second. And ironically, if you go back through the history and all the adjudicated water rights, you add them all up, and it's 88 cubic feet per second.
And this water is all coming off of the Stanislaus River system.
That's correct.
Which is a pretty robust system. Not the biggest in the state, but it's a significant watershed.
It is, and it has some very, very unique characteristics. Even today, it's an accreting water system. As time goes on, not just through snow melt, or typically it is through snow melt, but as you go down from the top down to the bottom, the system is continuously gaining water. Mm-hmm. And so that makes it a little different than others. And like I say, we're fortunate. We don't have a lot of it, but I tell you what, we have a whole lot more than a lot of folks. So
right. And you have these senior water rights, so you're really secure in that. So the water comes down, and it's still high on the hill in the flume, and then you drop it down into Murphy's, and you how does that work? How does dropping water?
Oh, it just creates probably if we have a large penstock. It's just a large 48-inch diameter tube that drops several hundred feet over several miles, and that differential in distance and elevation creates increased water pressure. It goes from 0 pounds per square inch down to up to 300, and that water then is run through a turbine that has a series of, it's a water wheel, it's got a series of buckets on it, and it hits those buckets, turns a generator, and we generate electricity. Sell the electricity to the open power markets. And it's not just the markets, that's that really ancient, what I'll call ancient historical generator, and those historical flumes also entitle us to the power we generate is a special category of, it doesn't produce any carbon, And so it's acknowledged by the state and the energy markets as well as being a qualified renewable energy resource. So it doesn't quite double its value. At one point it did, but now with a lot of competing resources, that market has softened quite a bit. This zero carbon, historical type power that we have, though it is gaining favor, particularly with some of the communities on the coast that, like Palo Alto, like Marin County, that I don't know, perhaps look at it as a boutique type of this is historical. You can actually go and have a glass of wine and walk along this historical flume system, whereas in their communities, their renewable resources are oftentimes landfills. And I would submit to you that having a glass of wine along our flumes is going to be a lot better kind of experience than sitting on a landfill that burns landfill gas.
I'd have to agree with you, Alan. So once you make power there, then is that where UPUD takes their share of the water? Is in that area?
Yeah, they're right at the top. Actually, from several diversion points, but one is right at Hunter's, okay. And then some others, what we call the North Ditch, which is down below, which is above our power plant, above Murphy's. And there's South Ditch, which is below the power plant. And then from there, the water meanders its way down to Ross Reservoir. Now, along the way, there's some areas, some strategic areas that we release water for fish and for recreational purposes as part of what makes having that water so precious. We do have those year-round creeks and flows.
The one that goes right through Murphy's, that's all water you provide?
That's correct.
And it goes all the way down through Angels as well?
Yeah, that's right.
And where does that water end up? When
that water ultimately makes its way past New Melones and out of our system, and then all the way down to Goodwin Dam, but eventually it goes on a field or into another fish release that ends up in San Francisco Bay.
So it's like you're taking water out of the Stanislaus way up high, and then we're using it, and then whatever's left is going right back into Maloney's and then down to other users. So it's kind of an in-basin diversion and use, which is a huge benefit to a lot of our citizens here.
Absolutely.
And then there's one more powerhouse in Angels Camp that you
right.
own?
That one is below Ross Reservoir, and that from Ross Reservoir we feed into our Angels Powerhouse 4 Bay, and at that point the City of Angels actually has a penstock that feeds water into their water treatment plant. So we flow that water through, that goes into Angels Creek, and then down below there are other users, other farmers that do divert some of that water, and then it just meanders on down to New Melones.
So very cool system. What has changed with demand because of the drought, would you say? Are you selling less water to your member agencies?
We are. They've had, of course, the state. Well, let me step back. Our two member agencies, UPUD provides agricultural water, irrigation water. We provide some irrigation water, but they're the only purveyor of agricultural water in the county. But on top of that, they do the potable water as well. City of Angels just does the potable water, and so the municipalities and those retail customers that are getting the drinking water, those are under very heavy, I call it very heavy-handed state mandates for cutting back. And I think in both cases they did, like many of the valley communities, they opted to cut down on watering days as opposed to a strict 25 or 32% reduction. the UPUD had put in their cutback and their curtailments that same 25% for agricultural use, and they're right on the money. I mean, one of the things that their customers kind of heeded the warnings and the handwriting on the wall, and it certainly is in the best spirit of what's really amounts to helping folks down in the valley have more water.
So we don't have a ton of time left, but how's the financial situation of your organization right now in light of the drought and the impacts that challenges you're facing?
This is going to be an extremely challenging year. I mean, the last 2 years were challenging, and like most smaller organizations, we've been doing a significant amount of cutting back on certain maintenance items. Can't do that forever. We actually have the perfect storm. We have half as much water as in a wet year, and the power markets are at the absolute rock bottom that they've been in the last 20 years. And so we're selling power into a really awful market, and we're not selling that much power because we don't have that much water. So we are approaching this next year very cautiously. There's projects that we put in several tiers and different lists, different buckets, if you will. And number ones are we have to do. Number twos, if we get certain grant monies. Number threes, if we, I don't know what November and December is going to bring, but if we're skiing on Thanksgiving, it's going to look a lot better for getting into those tier 3 projects. Our primary focus is keeping our crews and our staff stable, not losing anyone, keeping the system stable, because we know we could just get hammered this year coming up, don't know yet, and make sure that the way we operate, we've got this tunnel tap where we take our water, and the customer through the City of Angels and UPUD, those customers have a tap, and we're focused on the cost of providing the service from tap to tap, call it, without just going to it's up to the customers to pay. We're not doing that.
I don't mean to cut you off, but we're totally out of time.
Sorry.
People can go to Calaveras Conserves to learn more about your organization. And thank you so much for all you've done. Welcome to the county, and thanks for coming on the show, Alan.
Thank you so very much. It's been a pleasure.
And thank you for joining me on this edition of Inside View. I'm your host, Joel Metzger, and I hope you join me next time.